Things have changed to the electoral board. You guys are all wearing suits and ties.
All right, well, I think it's 10 o'clock. Let me call the meeting of the Prince William County Electoral Board to order. If you would all please rise for a moment of silence and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Join in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the first item of business is approval of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? And these have been circulated and, have been approved ahead of time, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So the minutes are approved
These are minutes for the
unanimously.
July 27th meeting of the board.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what I want to do next is recognize that we have special visitors on the agenda. And we thought it was appropriate to recognize someone who has served the voters of Prince William County probably close to 20 years, and that is Rob Williams. So Rob started out as a lowly election officer, and he worked several elections, and then like the people that Dina is constantly looking for, he was willing to step up to be a chief. And so he served as a chief election officer for, again, a number of years. He was always willing to rotate to a different precinct. Didn't say, I'm only gonna work in my home precinct. Wherever we needed leadership, we needed someone that could help train inexperienced officers, Rob was willing to go there. After serving as a chief officer for a number of years, he was hired as a special assistant. And the special assistants are the experienced chief's officers who they rotate around the county every election day, troubleshooting and making sure that if there are any problems in a precinct that there's someone there to address them. And he's every step of the way, Rob has really served the county very well. And then in 2016, he was appointed to the Electoral Board. And it was a little bit of a surprise appointment, but we were in the middle of a presidential primary in 2016 when we got word from the state Board of Elections that Rob had been appointed as a new Republican member of the Electoral Board. And he served with distinction as chair of the Electoral Board for 2 terms. And once his term ended and he was not reappointed, he went back to where he started. He worked a special election in February, I guess it was, and then he worked again the primary in June. So I don't know when you started, but I know it's got to be close to 20 years of the time that.
21 and a half.
All right, but right.
Yeah,
So
about 22 years.
yeah. But we wanted to take the opportunity to recognize Rob for his service to Prince William County, to the voters, and to this office. So this plaque says, "Recognition of Public Service presented to Robin P. Williams in appreciation for dedicated service to the voters of Prince William County. Electoral Board Member 2016-2022. Now, anyone who has been following this office knows that there have been challenges over that time period when Rob was serving as chair. And I can tell you that we were able to get through those challenges in great part because of Rob's leadership and willingness to work and just make sure that the voters were always served. So on behalf of the Elections Office and on behalf of the board, we're happy to present this recognition of public service to Robin Williams.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
You know,
It's
kind
kind
of
of
strange.
strange, it's been, sorry.
it would be very ingallant of me not to say something, at least for Robin, since he kept the chair warm for me all those years. It said that a proper word spoken at the appropriate time is like apples of gold and pitchers of silver. Also, Caesar once said that all glory is fleeting. So, thank you for your service. You were a very capable individual, and so we just hope we carry on in the traditions that you have established.
Thank you. It's still fun to be here. And you know, I encourage everybody, go out and be an election officer, be a chief. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit of work. This is a lot of work. You know, and go back because I still have a regular job.
Yeah.
And you know, they harass me all the time. You know, the latest thing is, well, ranging satellites versus Doppler versus, you know, angles and things like that, and explaining to my NASA people exactly what that means and why it's important and why that's not that important. Don't worry about it. But the challenges never end, and it's a lot of fun. But come out and serve, because we always need election officers, and it's always a great chance to meet new people and do fun things. You know, election day is a day off for me. He thinks I'm working. It's a day off from the regular grind of doing things like proposals and crazy stuff like that, and answering technical questions. And you know, the human spaceflight director is like, well, why aren't you freezing for the tourism launch? And we're like, we're freezing where it's appropriate. You know, they don't quite understand that, but that's my next call later today. The prison launch, you know, which slipped to Friday, which slipped to Saturday. So it keeps moving out there. So things are happening in the world, and it's a great chance to come out there and do stuff. But really, thank you very much for this. And I'm happy to still be serving out there, and I encourage the rest of you to come out and join us and have some fun.
Hear, hear.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, I gotta go back to work.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Good to see you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, report from electoral board members. Anyone have anything they want to report before we go into the rest of the agenda?
I do not.
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not.
Okay. Today is the 24th.
Sir.
Okay. So we just have one set. Okay, next, the general registrar's report.
Okay, so we are in election mode yet again, as we will be for the foreseeable future, given that our busiest stretch is basically the current, the next 15 months or so, with a potential for up to 4 elections during that period. So right now, in terms of the upcoming election, we've recruited over this summer. We added roughly nearly 280 new election officers. So those are on the agenda today. In terms of mail ballots, we've updated our envelopes. The state has new requirements that they don't require witness signature. They do require a social security number and a year of birth to be put on the envelopes. Thankfully, we planned for this when we were thinking about our envelope design previously, because we knew it was coming, so we were able to just modify and continue to use the general envelope design we used in the last election, which has been very successful. We've had some of our lowest rates of issues that we've ever had. with that envelope design, and we just modified the information that voters have to complete on it. So that has been actually approved by the state a couple days ago, so we're all set with that. Ballots were also approved by the state. That might have been yesterday, but it's within the last day or two here. So that helps us to move forward with LNA testing, with submitting our ballot order, with a number of things that we have to move forward with that, with putting sample ballots online for voters to be able to see. So that is all in process right now. We've added 4 more new temporary staff to our team for this election. So those hires just happened. That actually brings us close to 20 temporary staff, which I'm very happy to see, because when I first arrived, I really thought we had a complete deficit of temporary staff to assist the full-time staff here. And I think it's pretty common that in most jurisdictions, as you enter into election mode, that your office usually roughly doubles in size for the workload that increases. You're stretched to different locations, to different tasks, to tight timelines. So having that additional staff, I think, is going to help us with, continuing to make sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's and making sure to get everything we need to get accomplished. I have a training, staffing, and ballot plan that we're going to talk about later in the meeting when we get into the new business. So we'll get to that. I wanted to note there is a new requirement for ADA compliance now. The state sent out a reminder about that recently. The board has to confirm that we have done our due diligence towards that by October 16th. Luckily, it dovetailed with a project that we had started over the summer. Our goal was this summer to update our ADA surveys of the different sites and see if there are things that we need to address. So that worked out very well timing-wise. So we are in the process of that right now. So I think by the next board meeting, we'll have an update on that and can get the information that the board will need to approve that. So I'll email you guys the notice from the state, so you guys can take a look at that.
And so
a
that's
little
for
more closely.
all polling places, plus early voting locations, any voter.
Yeah, any place we're
location.
using for voting, essentially. Yep. So I'll email you guys that so you have a copy of that. We have security and office upgrades that are underway. That was our loan budget initiative for fiscal '24, was to make some security improvements to the office, which include the staff being safer, the ballots and the important documents that we have here being more secure, and improving some of the functionality of some of our space. Demonstrated no better than right now, as we have everyone jammed in here. One of our great challenges as an office is flexible space. We have enough room for our staff to do their job, but we do board meetings, trainings, pre-processing of absentee ballots. We have a lot of things, and sometimes those things are all happening on the same day. So having this space, we really have about 2 spaces that are this size, and that's it to accommodate all those things. So I know that we have plans in the future for a new office that's supposed to be in the 4 to 5 year, range. But in the meantime, there are some things that we need to do to be able to improve our functionality, and that's going to continue to be a challenge in terms of not having dedicated space for training. Having dedicated space for for board meetings and good usable space. I think this worked well a couple years ago when we'd have 3 people at a board meeting, but now we have more people, especially given as we get closer to elections, we draw a larger crowd. So apologies for the tight space today. We're doing the best we can with the resources that we have. Early voting modifications, I talked to you guys about that earlier in the year. I've been consulting with the county management on that issue, and I think it's been decided to move that into the agenda for next year, essentially. I will probably talk to the board about it, the Board of Supervisors, in November, They don't think there's going to be any movement in terms of a vote until next year, and that's for a couple reasons. One of which is that it's an election year for our local election officials. Also, while we're doing that ordinance, we don't want that to be while a key election is going on to create confusion as to when what locations are going to be open if those do change. So that will likely be sometime after the presidential preference, and I think the goal is that by the general election of next year, the presidential election, that we have those in place, because the general goal is to expand the number of early voting locations, and that suits no election better than the presidential election when we have a really high turnout, especially for early voting. So that's kind of the general calendar. I'll get you all more details as that solidifies a little bit further. But I think that's the goal at this point. We're also trying to finalize our compliance. We have the state security and cybersecurity standards. The state, requires that we comply with more than 100 different standards in that space. We did pretty well. We have to complete that survey each year and identify areas that we need to improve. We did pretty well, but as you all know, there's certain areas that we need to update, so we are working on that to be in full compliance. I think that's all I have for now. I did give you all a copy of just the our task list as to where we are on different tasks, so you can see we have software we use called Electask, which really helps us manage the whole election process. We started using that earlier this year, and I think staff has generally liked it. It does give everybody automatic email notifications when they have tasks coming up, so it helps us to make sure that nothing key is being forgotten. It also, just the act of building the list in the first place helps us make sure that we're thinking about the process, because everything we do has layers and layers and layers. And really, when we're talking about an election, the success of an election, I think that really happens now. The voting starts at the 45-day mark, and then we go through election and we certify afterwards, and that's all important as well. But elections are really set up in that 90 to 45-day window that we're in right now, because if you're not on task with something that has 5 dependent tasks down the road, then you're not going to be set up to succeed, and your time and your resources are limited. So I think it's really helped. I think we combine this with the Electoral Board and General Registrar duties that we established earlier this year to report on those. So I do need to make some updates for this for the next board meeting, but I'll add in some of those statutory deadlines as well to this. So I think we started off with about 250. It's grown to 300 plus, and we're continuing to refine it and improve it, which is good because it helps us with kind of the process overall. So that kind of gives you guys an idea of where we're at now in terms of the tasks that are due as of today. I think we have 5 that are behind that are still need to be done, and then there's a few that are for next week and the week after that are already complete. So I think overall we're right around where we should be. Some of those are set by statute, but some of those are fluid depending on different factors and vendors and things like that. So
I really appreciate the fact you put this together, Eric. If I understood you correctly, you're going to weave in the GREV duties into this. It's not currently done, so
some of them are in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last question I had was on the ADA compliance piece. Where would that fit in? You said our due date was
October 16th.
Our due date is October 16th, or that's the state's.
That's the state deadline. By then, you all need to sign off that we as a county are compliant with.
And that's not currently on this.
No, I need to add that
If you wouldn't
in.
mind just please adding that to the
Yes.
list. Great. Thank you for doing this.
You guys have any other questions about any other stuff I covered there?
I do not.
Okay. If not, I ask
Natalia, voter registration report.
Microphone over here, I just have a quick question. Chris, may I grab this and stand over here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We had set that up where that is if, let me see. Chris, do you need to monitor anything on the camera?
No, that one's fine.
Okay. Maybe if Denny could switch, and wait, we're gonna need this, because I saw there were a number of speakers today, so we're gonna need that seat. Can you switch with Denny, Chris, or maybe just for the moment, Denny, if we could, if Natalia can sit for her thing.
Sweet. My legs were shaking.
Thank you, Denny, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Alrighty, so per request of Electoral Board, from now on, we will be providing our voter registration report at every Electoral Board meeting. So you have received your handout that includes our statistics. So if you follow along, it's a voter registration statistics. Then we have updates. Then we have voter cancellations and the confirmation mailing. A few things to point out. The August is not completed yet. It is noted on the report. Yes.
Just I'm seeing a few I can't hear in the back, so if you can just try to, I know it's
Me
difficult.
speak.
Yeah, if you can talk a little louder, that'd be great.
Okay. Again, the handout is in your hands. You will see it is available at the table as well. So I am not explaining anything on the report. It's pretty self-explained. I'm just making notations that August is not completed. There are some explanations what we mean under active registered voter, inactive registered voter, what is the various transactions for those who have not heard that before. And then, like I mentioned, there are some statistics on the voter cancellations and the confirmation mailing. So that is one of my updates on today's meeting. That we did inform you last Electoral Board meeting that there was a confirmation mailing or National Change of Address program that took place on July 24th. It is per code 24.2428 and also according to the National Voter Registration Act or an VRA, state does that twice a year now. So it was successfully mailed out. We have to wait again per code 30 days for those people to act on the notice that they have received. And after 30 days, which has happened today, it's August 24th, all those people who have not responded to the notices, they will be changed, their status in our VERS, the state program will be changed automatically by elect from active to inactive. So at next Electoral Board meeting, you will see those numbers in our report as well. The second update I wanted to give you, again, during our last Electoral Board meeting, our secretary asked me what NAMFIS stands for. So for the minutes, I just wanted to give the abbreviation. And NAMFIS is a National Association for Public Health Statistics and Information System. So that is what that stands for. And again, to remind you, that is the program that we're using to double check the death records. So that is done through state. We put the request through and the state confirms if that person has been identified as deceased. And the last update I have for you is, as you remember, at the last meeting we reported that we're going to start a new voter verification program where if there's an undeliverable mail that comes back to our office and that mail has a forwarding address on it, we're going to go ahead and mail a form that Eric presented at the last meeting asking those voters to verify a new address, possibly change that, or cancel their registration if that is an action that they would like to take. So to report to you, we have mailed about a little bit over 60 those confirmation mails from this office. We received just a few back. One of the things that we noticed during this verification program that when we were getting ready to mail those letters, some of the citizens already took care of their registration and they have updated their information. So therefore, we didn't need to proceed on verifying or making sure that they changed and updated their registration. So that's a great thing for us to hear. Of course, in these numbers, the confirmation mailing that was done by state, we have not started to receive those yet. So it would be probably by next meeting, we will have some update on that. If the board has any questions, I'm more than willing to answer. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it to Eric. I think he has a couple other things to add.
I do have a question for you. Is there a way that, I appreciate you doing this, Natalia, and the team, and it's based on the last two meetings we've had, it's fairly self-explanatory, and I'd like to keep it, keep it that way. What I'd like to ask the team to do is on this second page, just kind of, all the activity that you're doing, I would like to capture that here, if you don't mind. Even those 60 ballots, or 60.
Absolutely.
Just any other additional activity, in addition to the statutory ones, the additional work that the team is doing, just please include that in there.
Okay.
For, again, for transparency
Yep, so
purposes,
we'll-
show all the activity, so it's a snapshot that we have as a board, realizing it's only, it's only accurate on the day that it's printed, because it's constantly work in motion, but I really appreciate that.
All right, will do.
Let me, so at the bottom of the first page of various transactions, you have it broken down by each month. I assume these are all new voter registrations, or some cancellations, or?
It is all transactions, so and I might miss a few, but it would be all denial registration, all cancellations, all new registered transfer outs from one jurisdiction to another. It considers as a transaction as well. All duplicate registrations, it is considered as a transaction as well. So anytime we touch a voter registration record, it is recorded as a transaction.
Okay.
So some people, of course, during the, like, for example, DMV process, they would go to DMV, something wasn't right, they will update their voter registration, they go back, and every time they do that DMV transaction, they update their voter registration. Sometimes they receive a voter registration from one person up to like 10 times, and that is why the administrative duplicate program was created, to reduce those duplicates. However, it still counts as a transaction.
Okay, so it might be helpful, at least for me, if you, when we're doing these monthly reports, also give us a number of how many new registrations for each
Absolutely.
county, because I want to keep track of, how many new people are getting.
So we have an ability to break it by new, transfer in and transfer out. Is that the numbers that the board would like to see? Perfect, will do.
Okay, thank you. All right.
London, do you have any questions?
No, you're explaining fine. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple other additions to the voter registration report that I wanted to add. It did get submitted to me a list of about 40 individuals. There's a code section in Virginia, 24.2429. Whenever a voter is alleged to be registered, except for removal of residents from the precinct, the registrar can cancel their registration based on their information or based on the information supplied by 3 different citizens. So I had 3 citizens supply. I think it was 43 people in total. So this was a bit of a tricky one to analyze. I talked to some other registrars. Some of them said, you can't do it based on that. Some of them said you can. So code interpretation always provides challenges to this position. Now, I think the pertinent language in there is it says removal of residents from the precinct, because it's unclear to me, and I didn't have any legislative history to go off of, as to whether they are talking about when a voter moves. There's a little court history to sort of suggest that. Or if they're talking about something related to perhaps redistricting. I think the use of precinct specifically is interesting, and they do define that in the code as well, and that's just defined as what we all think of the precinct definition to be, meaning the boundaries of a particular area where there's one polling place that serves it. So precinct 104, precinct 403, these are precincts. So I'm moving forward with canceling those voters. There's a lot of steps in it. I have to publish it at the courthouse. We have to send mail notice. It can't be within certain time parameters. But I think that the definition showing precinct specifically leans toward some kind of districting thing or something that doesn't preclude it from being a move situation. I can see how another registrar would legitimately interpret that as, okay, there already are a lot of move rules in place. You don't need this additional, process. But I think the use of precinct is particularly, relevant. So I just want to let you guys know that I'm moving forward with that at the moment.
Could I ask you, so I didn't read any of the, the supporting documents. So these are private citizens who have done the research, or they have concluded somehow that they believe that this voter is no longer in Prince William, or, and they've submitted this information to you. Maybe this is something that, that anybody can do. It seems a little bit vigilante to me that a private citizen can challenge somebody else's voter status based on that private citizen's research. And I don't want this to become an ongoing project where we, instead of people being challenged in the precinct on election day, we have an ongoing process of trying to weed people out and cancel people through this kind of a process. And I don't know whether you talked to elect about their interpretation of the code. I mean, clearly, just being in a different precinct where they're still in the same place, but we drew them in a different precinct. That absolutely should not be a reason. But I just want to, express some concern about, proceeding with caution in this, because to me, there are steps that the code sets out for elects and for individual registrars to do. And I have concerns about this process of trying to cancel someone's voter registration status.
There's certainly a lot of research on the area, and policy groups that will tell you this is good or bad depending on their political bend. I would guess, I think that there's certainly an argument that there are a lot of sections of code that have been brought to our attention recently that are maybe perhaps the root of neglect, and that people haven't used them more so than that their intention is what it is. I mean, that happens to legislatures all the time. I mean, when they passed, just to think of a recent example, the rule about us not being able to accept free services, there were a number of things they immediately realized were now going to become problematic, that were as simple as, can a group of election officers that are working at a polling place get a pizza from the local pizza place that sends that to them because they want to support their election workers. So certainly, and that's why looking at the definitions and the legislative intent of this, I also share some of those concerns. Now, I was provided with good documentation on these, so I have been asked by groups, hey, can we just send you this list? I think that obviously is fraught with potential issues of partisan groups sending me dueling lists of trying to eliminate certain voters on the list. So I think there's a couple things related to this that I would say. My last bullet point was, I reserve the right to change my mind and interpretation of this rule. And that is because I think there's certainly reasonable interpretation of this rule that can be made. I do think in this instance the documentation that was provided with me was thorough and was, pretty definitive. But we'll have to look at this as it evolves, and perhaps elect can refine some guidance on this. They weigh in on some issues and they don't weigh in on others, and that certainly becomes a challenge, and something that is a little different for me. In Virginia's a very decentralized state. That has its advantages and its disadvantages. When I worked in Maryland, the state just tells you how you're supposed to apply it, and it's straightforward. And most of the things we have here, we have a handbook that tells us everything that we are supposed to do. This is not mentioned in that handbook, really, outside of a passing mention, and there's certainly not a procedure that's in place for it. I do think that it reminds me similarly of last year we had the issues with dead voters and groups providing obituaries, and we accepted those for a while. We adjusted records, and then Elect said at some point, you can't do that, stop doing that. So a bunch of jurisdictions stopped doing that. And then later on, they said, okay, you can do it, but here's the procedure that has to be followed. So my suggestion, and I'll email Elect something along the lines of they should define the parameters of this process a little bit better, so that it gives registrars an opportunity to clean the rolls for truly stale voters, but also sets the parameters to prevent political groups from using this as a hammer to create chaos in the registration process. And I think those are the things that we have to think through. I see thoughts online sometimes about why don't they just do this and why don't they just do this? These are complicated issues with a lot of intersection points, and arguing that something is clear and should be done a certain way is pretty naive and pretty, doesn't fully explore the array of rights that you have to consider. Because you could get sued by a group that gives you a list of names and says you're not following up on this, and we could get sued by a voter who says you're not rightfully canceling my registration. They were wrong to do that. So anyway, I think that's where we are now. So on the good side of this, I also got a list of 43 names. I didn't get a list of 500 names. I didn't get a list of 1,000 names. I got a list of 43 names. And I'm sure that there are nooks and crannies of the voter rolls that need to be, cleaned out sometimes. So if this does get to a few records, and all of the voters that we have looked at, I think some of these are just stale ones. Maybe the state missed them in like an NCOA mailing or something like that. It's possible. I think also, just for the public's awareness, all of those dead voters and obituaries that were given to us, and all of these voters that have been given to us now, we check their voter record every single time. This voter set was supposedly moved in 2017. When was the last time they voted? It was before 2017. A lot of cases, they've never voted in Virginia at all. So I haven't seen a single case yet of a voter that we've been given, that we've been asked to remove from the registration rolls, that voted after the time it was alleged that they were removed. So I think that shows that there are safeguards in the system, and people should also know too that most of the voters on these lists are already identified as people that would be removed. So a lot of the individuals that were on the list I was given, they were sent a confirmation mailing in 2021. So they would automatically be removed after the 2024 election, after that 2 federal elections passes anyway. And if you're an inactive voter, you can't just go into a polling place and vote. You have to sign a statement saying that where you reside and that you have the right to vote there. You also, if you're an inactive voter, you can't just have a mail ballot sent to you. You have to return to active status. So there are safeguards in place to prevent fraud. And I think Rob encouraged people to become election officers. I would, echo the same. We're always trying to recruit more election officers. And I think that gives you more and more of an opportunity to see kind of how these processes work and the safeguards that are in place and the things that the state legislature did think about when they were trying to set up the process to make sure that it was, fair to the voters, but also safeguarded against fraud. So in that vein, in terms of our voter rolls and the numbers that I got, I did want to mention too that I did, we get some comparative analysis and things of stuff sometimes. I think our voter rolls are pretty good. Looking at Prince William County, of the top 5 counties in the state, one measure can be, how does the percentage of voters that are registered compared to your overall population. We have the lowest percentage of the top 5 jurisdictions in Virginia. We are second among the top 10 jurisdictions in Virginia. More importantly, and I mentioned this the last meeting, and I'll mention it again, the code that we are supposed to follow, we follow. And I haven't heard complaints that relate to that our staff is not doing not only a good job at that, but an exemplary job, and they've gotten lots of compliments from the observers who have been in our office, reviewing our mail, watching the process, coming to meetings, whatever that might be. So I'm proud of our staff. I think they do a good job. I think some of the comparative analysis bears that out. At different times, we've gotten questions from people about, I had one data set that was sent to me last year that had, there are 100 identical voters here that shouldn't be on the rolls. Well, it wasn't. There's a certain percentage of the population that are twins. These were twins that shared the same first initial. And as we looked at them, we realized that they were different people. I even looked at their signatures to verify these are actually 2 people. So, I'm sure some of their parents would love for them to be out of the house, I would imagine. But a lot of them were twins that were just living at the same residence. Likely they were mostly young people, I would presume, that are still staying with their parents, or maybe they just have that strong twin bond and wanted to, live together. So we've had a number of things, that have happened like that. And I'll reiterate that dissatisfaction with that process or dissatisfaction with those results, the state legislature are the ones that decide those rules. And if you think the rules should be different, that's not my job to decide. I have to look at the rules that are in front of me. I have to take my best analysis I can of those, the guidance that the state gives me, the priorities the board sets, the guidance that the board sets, or the policies the board makes in the areas where you all have, authority, either explicitly or areas where that authority is shared. And then I also have to prioritize our duties. So when we're looking at things and somebody says, well, this could be better. Well, there's 100 things that could be better. And we are always working to try to make those. We're going to talk about a couple of them today when we get to training. We're always working to make those improvements to our process. Natalia talked about one we just added to the voting. We've modified our, ballot envelopes over the last year. There's a ton of things that we have improved. And the board sets their priorities for areas they feel need to be improved that are within their duties, and I set the priorities for areas that I think need to be improved. So I don't think that if someone thinks that there's a certain area that they think that we should be working on, the county pays me, and you all have appointed me to make assessments of those things and areas that need to be improved. So I think those 43 voters are not living here any longer. I don't think they're going to be voting, but I think they should come off the rolls off the voter rolls per Virginia Code 242429. I also need to finish the election officer manual so that our officers make the right decisions and do the right things at the polling place. Those are all important things, and they all compete for time. So I'm going to see if we can make those changes before this election. But given the time frames that there are, it's very difficult because we have to mail the notice for 10 days before a hearing can be held. A hearing has to be held, and then we can't do any modifications. I can't make changes under this law within 60 days of the general election. So it's real tight. So if I can do it before this election, I will. If I can't, it will be immediately following, this election. And we'll see where this area kind of carries in the future, and see if I can get some, additional guidance from the state as they consider these things a little bit more. I think that's it. I've talked to myself hoarse.
New business, election officer, staffing, and training plan.
Okay, so you all have a chart here that shows the staffing plan. So We are looking at a total of approximately 845 officers. That's our goal. Each site will have one chief, one assistant chief, and then the new position we're calling this is the equipment provisional specialist. I'm looking for John. I'm looking for John and for thumbs up from the back of the room. That's okay. I know it's EPS, but I was trying to remember what that stands for. So the equipment and provisional specialist. The chiefs really asked for this. They want kind of a dedicated person. And when we talk about the training, I'll get to kind of why. We have an equipment specialist already. The equipment is really the first hour before we open and the hour after we open are their most critical times. And during the rest of the day, they're doing other duties in the precinct. So this is a person that with the chief and the assistant chief, I think will help out with the provisional process. And the chief and the assistant chief can kind of work out, how they rotate that duty during the precinct. 1 and I think 4, depending on the size of the precincts, mostly 2 or 3, to match the number of poll books we have. You can see the number of poll books there. We make sure every precinct has at least 2 poll books for check-in, even if some of them don't need that many, but having one for backup in case there's any kind of technical issue is usually a good plan. And one of those poll books at each of these sites is dedicated to the chief station. So that is for their use, for problem areas, for provisional ballots, lookup, for address lookup. So they use it for that. And I think our hope is that what we're going to try to do not only with this EPS in terms of having more staff that's trained specifically on provisional ballot, but we want to make sure that we have the check-in clerks send voters to the provisional station, to the chief station, rather than hashing those things out at the check-in. The check-in station should really be the 95% of people that come in that have their ID ready, that are in the poll book, that are at the address the poll book says. Let's move them on and get them their ballot and let them vote. And the ones that are problem areas or that need to be explored a little bit or that are likely provisional ballots, let's get them over to the chief's table and let's have additional staff that can help the chief with that process so that it doesn't slow down the line in a busier election, and also so that the staff that is the officers that are attending to the individuals who need a provisional ballot or have a special situation are really more thoroughly trained on how to manage those different situations. So I think that is the hope there. We also have, each precinct has a greeter, a person by the voting booths, and a person by the scanner. I think they tend to kind of rotate to different areas where they're needed, but they're at least there to assist voters that have a problem with scanning their ballot, that have a question when they're at the voting booth, that maybe need some direction outside, or someone to hand out the stickers to the voters, all those different functions. So all told, this puts about 7 to 10 officers at each precinct. I think from the officers in the past couple elections since I've been here, we've heard either the number of officers they have is about right, or they say we have too many. And I always like that because I think, good, give people some breaks and rotate them onto breaks and things like that. So too many I don't think is ever a problem in terms of making sure voters are getting good service and that the chiefs have the support they need to do, because I know that once the chiefs get in that precinct, between, you may have a media person or observer show up, a poll watcher with questions, special voter situations. There's a lot of things that kind of are keeping you busy and on your toes. So we want to make sure they have plenty of resources to get the job done. So you all have to approve the staffing plan. There's that, the training plan, and the ballot order. So you all have any questions for me about that or concerns?
So so your goal is to train 845 officers. So this chart Is this what you're planning for the fall?
That's the training plan.
Right.
I can go and get to that, and you guys can
Okay.
kind of talk about them in combination, or approve them in combination if you like, because they do kind of interact with each other. So the training plan there, what I was talking about earlier, so we heard some different things from some of the chiefs. We get good feedback from people, but, I know from having started off in training, when I started off in elections, we would do a survey and, half the chiefs would say, the training needs to be shorter because it takes too much of my time, and half of them would say the training needs to be longer because I want to make sure I'm prepared on election day. So managing those different expectations can be challenging, but we think essentially there's two groups here. One is the sort of leadership group, the chief, the assistant chief, and the EPS. Those are the individuals that are doing the harder jobs. Those are the individuals that need to know the rules more extensively, and we want to make sure they get more one-on-one small group training. So we had chiefs classes last election. They were a little bit bigger. We're going to shrink those down. They're going to be 6, 7, 8 people, maybe even less at times in these classes. They're all going to have their own piece of equipment that they're going to use. So they're going to have to go through, they worked in pairs and stuff before, which sometimes one of them's, given the instructions and the other one's actually learned. So this way, everybody kind of has to sink or swim a little bit on that stuff. So there'll be a little bit of a lecture on sort of some of the chief content they need to know, and we want to go into some things about the provisional process. We had a meeting actually yesterday with the provisional team and the election training team, and we were talking about, what are the common issues that we're seeing, what are the things we need to fix, how can we work that into the training class. But mostly the class will be interactive examples, activities, practice, especially in tally point, especially in provisional ballot, tally point I should say, with closing as well, and then completing the equipment as well. And we're thinking that this is something that we want to make sure that those leaders all complete this certification class at least once a year. And then once they do it, they're kind of certified for the year, and then we'll repeat it, when we get around to the next cycle. Obviously, we would open it up. If anybody wants to be more prepared, we would never turn them away from doing the class again. So that would be the one side. So that's about, of these officers, that's a little over 300 of the officers in those 3 positions. And then for the other 500 officers, we would do kind of large informational sessions where we're walking through, the basics of what they need to know, how to check in voters, how to distribute ballots, what things to look out for at the scanner, customer service type things, and that will really be lecture. We're going to do most of those online, although we are going to provide a couple of in-person over at McCourt. At the supervisor's chambers there, so we can pack a lot of people in, because we know not all of our officers like to participate in the online sessions. Some of them would much prefer to come and do those in person. So that is the split that we've kind of envisioned is giving very concentrated, small classroom, multiple trainers for the leadership, so they get very individualized training. They get to practice and do a lot, and then that the larger group at least is updated on the sort of differences between this election and the last election, the common stuff that they need to know. We do get a lot of questions sometimes about can't you offer a new officer training course and let us take a shorter one? And my answer to that is always some of the new officers can know the rules better than returning officers. I mean, you get a wide range. So I think our job is to, if anything, over-prepare. And, my apologies to the officers who truly know their stuff and don't need to be doing as extensive a training as they have to every election. But at least for now, I think that's the position I'd like to lean towards, to make sure that they know what the rules are, that they're doing the process properly. And I think they're doing a really, we see mistakes here and there, but they overall doing a very fantastic job. And I think we kind of saw that at the recount when you have, dozens and dozens of precincts and your results match up, tit for tat. That's the machine's doing their job, but that's also the election officers doing their job, so.
Can you give us just a quick primer on the ballot order versus the number of voters in each precinct?
Yeah. So you see in that chart, we have the number of registered voters per site. And we know that I think we're planning for about a 43% turnout. Now, that's not us predicting there will be a 43% turnout. That is looking at historical turnout for this election and going, okay, at 43%, we feel pretty safe in terms of that we're going to be in a high turnout scenario. That'll be where we're near or hovering around. Most likely a little lower than that. But that's higher than what we've seen in the last 3 sort of county-focused elections from 4 years prior to now and going back. So if we're thinking about that, we do know that a certain number of voters are going to vote by mail. Our mail voting list is continuing to grow. We're closing in on 20,000 voters now that are signed up for the to receive mail ballots for this election. So that continues to grow. People seem to really like that. And we know that a certain number of voters are going to use early voting.
Okay.
So we can assume if you see the number of registered voters there, you know, if you've got, let's say, looking at precinct 101, well, they have 3,038 registered voters. Let's say in a high scenario that 1,500 of them show up, they get 50% for this election. We know that a certain number of them are going to go vote by mail. They're going to vote early. So let's say 1,500 of them in a high turnout scenario. Let's say 1,000 of them go to vote on election day. Well, we've got 1,800 ballots there. So even in a scenario where turnout is higher than expected and where the number of voters that vote on election day is higher than expected, I feel safe with where we're at with these numbers. I think basically what we have here is the number of voters that we expect at each of the polling places. I think we've got about twice as many ballots as what we expect. And this is always a balance of you never want to not have enough ballots.
Correct.
But you also don't want to ballots are expensive, and you don't want to order thousands and thousands of extra ballots if you don't need to. So we're always trying to find that middle ground of what is safe enough to feel safe without wasting taxpayer money.
Okay.
So
And who's printing the ballots?
K&H prints the ballots for
Okay,
us.
so they're gonna do all the mail, and then they're gonna print the ballots for election day and early voting also?
Yeah, so, no, they don't do early voting. So the mail ballots, they print on as we send those out, they're printed, we'll start off with at the 45-day mark, we'll start off with that big initial batch of, I think it's in the 18 to 19,000 range right now. And then as we get additional applications, they kind of, they do 33 some days, they do 5 on others. They just kind of do it day by day. Early voting, same thing. We have on-demand ballot printers, so all the ballots are printed at those sites. So we don't have to order absentee ballots. We don't have to order early voting ballots. It's also good from an overrun standpoint there. We don't have to print any ballots that we don't need, and we don't have any ballots laying around that are, presenting potential security risks as well.
Okay.
So it's just the election day ones we have to worry about. In addition to the ballot numbers that are here, we do print 50 ballots for each precinct for LNA testing.
Correct.
And we do print 100 ballots for each precinct for provisional ballots.
Good.
So.
All right. Last question I had underneath these 2 items for the election officer staffing, the training plan, and the approval of the ballot order. Can you show me where those are? I think I saw them on this, on our little task tracker, where those are. I think
Where they are on the task tracker?
yeah, I'm just.
I think they're below. They're in the future area.
Their future area.
I don't have a copy of that one. I
Okay.
can borrow London's. I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Down
around the
towards
60-day
bottom,
mark.
The staffing plan, finalized prep staffing plan for board, is that the one we're doing today?
Yes.
It's down towards the,
I want to say it's around the 60-day mark.
75
Yeah,
days.
60-day mark. Have board approved training plan.
okay. this one here specifically, it's on the second page, was it the 75-day large task, admin, finalized prep staffing plan for board?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what we're doing today.
Yep.
Okay. And then the other two, the training plan and the
Training
ballot
plan.
order.
Yeah. Training plans at 60-day.
Okay.
Ballot
Check.
order.
If it's not on there, I don't wanna belabor it, I just want, yeah, ballot order, including tests, is down there at 60.
Yeah.
I see that, okay, just so I, again, for my own edification, we'll just track what we're doing.
Yeah, it's on there for like from the staff standpoint.
Yes,
That's the part I need to go update is some of the board ones. So
Okay.
2 of them are on there, but that's one of the additional board ones I need to add to this
Thank you.
list.
So someone who has never worked an election before, don't you think they should do an in-person training rather than just do something online and show up on election day?
Ideally, yes. One of our challenges is, we really ran into this during the primary election, is space. If we had an office where we had our own training facilities, it would be much easier to manage. This is, of all the counties I've worked in, our county does not have community centers and recreation centers. I worked in Montgomery County, we had 20 recreation centers with 60 rooms. We could find a training, we could find a place to train anytime we wanted to, 3 days beforehand. We reserve stuff months in advance. And some of the places we're in, we use Buck Hall, which is great, and the fire department lets us use that space. And honestly, it's an excellent size space for training for lots of different things. But we are guests there, and if they have something that comes up, we lose. So it's really challenging to find the space, and that was something that we talked about going into this. That was a real issue for us the last election. So in terms of the people that are in that group of the all officers, so the leadership, obviously, they're all getting very hands-on training. The other officers, I think probably 70 or 80% of them are returning officers who have done the tasks and things in person, at least for an election or two, oftentimes for many elections. So yeah, I think if we want to do a new officer training, it's possible, but the space is really the thing. Well, I tell you what we do, Keith, is we do always offer labs towards the end, where we have open space where officers can come in and practice on machines, ask questions. So we will offer that as well. We always do that every election. We don't usually get a lot of takers on it, but we always want to make sure it's that it's an option for people. So there is an opportunity there.
should we take that for an action item, to your point, to, in the future, look for additional training opportunities or locations?
Is that specifically for new
No.
officers that you're talking about,
But
Keith?
just generally speaking, yeah, I think we should,
Yeah, I just think, especially someone who's never worked an election before, keep the in-person sessions, sort of reserve those for the brand-new people. And then someone who's worked a couple of elections, they can get a refresher online. But someone who's never been in a precinct before, I think it's, they need to at least have one in-person training, just to become familiar with the process.
Yeah.
So, I don't know whether you can, restrict the 2 in-person sessions to just new people, but or add another session if you're gonna have 90 slots available. And they, you may have enough people that just wanna do it online.
Well, we could look at for the labs too, especially because it's just the new officers. We could look at requiring them to come into one of the labs potentially. I just have to look. I mostly have to look at staffing and space for that. I don't doubt we could do that from a logistical standpoint of our officer staffing team being able to do that. But in terms of the space and in terms of Trying to think where we can do that. This is where we need a bigger office.
Like I said, we don't need to solve it here, but I think we should take that for action to look at,
Yeah. Okay.
generally speaking.
I'll see if we can do that. I'll see if we can get, them to come in, at least just to get, if you can get 30 minutes where you're actually doing some practice checking voters in, that really, not only does it help with people being more prepared, but it just increases the comfortability of an officer and, going into their first election. I will say I did in Arlington, because, especially being there during COVID at its peak, we did all of our trainings, online, and the officers did do, an excellent job. So I think there are ways to do the online training in a way
Okay.
that makes it effective. But I don't disagree with Keith that there's no substitute for getting in there and actually doing it.
Okay, any other questions, or do we have a motion?
Put forward a motion to approve the election officer staffing and training plan.
Second.
You want to include the ballot order
I
with
will
that?
include, amend that to election officer staffing and training plan and approval of the ballot order.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimously. All right. Before we move, I just want to say one thing about the training. So, for a number of reasons, last fall, we had a situation where the Republican committee decided to do their own training for election officers. And I just think that that's wrong for either political party to be training election officers. I mean, they're hired and trained by the county. And, I don't see any reason why either political party should get involved in the training of election officers. And one glaring example of why, so last November, one of the brand-new Republican officers who was working at a precinct on election day decided on his own to do a hand count of all the ballots that were cast in that precinct during the day. And that's certainly not something that that person learned in training from the Prince William County Office of Elections. And there's not a Democratic way to run a precinct or a Republican way to run a precinct. And the election officers are there to represent their parties, but they're not there to be poll watchers. And they're not there to assume responsibility that goes beyond what they have in the code or what they've been trained by the office. So I'm hopeful that we won't have a repeat of that situation where we had separate training that was being conducted by a political party. So, all right. Early voting days, hours.
So this is whatever you all think is the best option for this. We've been using, for the hours, we're required to be open for 8 hours under the code. We've been using 8:30 to 4:30 for that. You all have the luxury of up to 3 options of 8 to 4, 8:30 to 4:30, or 9 to 5. And we have generally given 8:30 to 4:30 because it does give us time to wrap up at the end of the day for the officers. It kind of works out well with that. And then it's sort of the not too early, not too late, just right option of the 3. In terms of the weekend days, whatever you all want to do, we will align our staffing with those options. I think we did. I have mentioned before that the last Sunday that's available, does put pressure on our staff, because between that week and the next week when election day happens, where staff has to work on Sunday, it just ends up being a 3-week slog where they don't get a single day of break. And I think last time you all preserved Sunday voting, you did it the Sunday before, and then you had Saturdays. And if you all want to expand on those or keep them as is, we will adjust accordingly.
So I want to continue Sunday voting, at least one Sunday. We've done that every election, primary and general, since the code authorized it. So I agree it should be earlier in October. You know, one of the Sundays, not that immediately close to the final day. So I don't have a specific date. I don't know whether there's a Sunday that is is best for you.
Well, just to tell you the parameters, so we have to have early voting on the 28th and the 4th, those Saturdays. The Saturday, the 29th of October is the immediately preceding Sunday. The 22nd would be the staff's preference, but either or both or none are all at your option.
Staff's preference to not?
To do the 22nd rather than the 29th, because it at least gives a break day in between a pretty long
Okay.
slog.
I don't see why not. Sounds good to me.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I have a motion to continue the same hours, 8:30 to 4:30 PM, as well as Sunday voting minus the Sunday, the 22nd of October.
Minus the 29th. would be
29th,
the-
I disregard, yeah, I was looking at minus the 29th.
So it'd be on the 22nd.
It would be the Sundays,
That's not,
but not on the 29th, right?
you want to do more than one Sunday?
No, just, tell me what.
If we're doing the same days, it would be Sunday 10/22. It would be Saturday 10/28,
Tell me what the answer is.
and Saturday November 4th. That would
Okay.
that would be consistent with what you all did in the last election. If that is your
Yes,
that's your plan.
that's the motion.
Second.
Continue doing what we've been doing.
All right. Do we, will the two new locations that are added at the end of the early voting period, will they be there on the 22nd? Or do they
Yes.
come?
The voting would start. No, actually, voting would start there on the 24th by statute.
Okay, so we'll open with DMB, this office, the Haymarket Library.
And those would all have, under what you guys have proposed, those would all have early voting on both the Saturdays and the Sunday. And then Brentsville and Dumfries would start on the 24th, and they would have both Saturdays, but not the Sunday.
Right.
Good.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Appointment of new election officers.
You will have the list of officers. I think it's 278 in total. The Democratic chair approved all the officers that are requested to represent that party. The Republican chair objected to a few officers who, and they were changed to nonpartisan on your list, but also nominated several nonpartisan officers to be Republican officers. So essentially adds about, I think it adds about 100 additional Democratic officers and about 60 extra Republican officers.
58, okay.
And then a number of nonpartisan officers. Thank you to the chairs for both reviewing and communicating, not only timely, but ahead of the deadline.
I've reviewed the list. I motion that we approve the appointment of the new election officers as printed, provided to the general registrar.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So, Eric, can you, now that these people have been approved, can you give us a breakdown total of Dems, Republicans, nonpartisan?
Yeah. It's pretty easy to remember. We have this is active officers. So we have more in the database, but these are the ones we've been in touch with, we've confirmed. And I should note too that our staff has been doing a great job of reaching out and contacting the officers and trying to pull some of the people who we haven't heard from into the active pool. So we have 450 Republican officers that are active. We have 550 nonpartisan officers that are active, and we have 650 Democratic officers that are active. That's good. So we mentioned earlier the goal being about 850 officers for this election. We usually start with, more than that because we lose about, 15 or 20% of the officers that we start off with fall off because of obligations and health and all kinds of different, things that life throws in their way. But that does give us enough to start off if we're looking at, sort of our initial list being about 1,000 officers. We do have enough to cover about, 400-ish Republicans, 400-ish Democrats, and about 200 nonpartisans. That's not an exact number because obviously this depends on locations and willingness to work. The elections officer staff has a new expression they use with officers to try to encourage them to be flexible on the Republican side because it's harder to match up. We have extra Dem officers, so it's a little more flexible. We say Republicans roam in Prince William County because sometimes they need to travel to other locations, and we're appreciative of them being willing to do that because after we assign those initial officers, we only have about 50 additional Republican officers at the moment. So that's better than where we were a couple years ago before we did a lot of aggressive, recruiting. But we still would like to be, at a higher number. Overall, that is 1,650 in terms of our number of active officers. And I always say that you want at least double the number of officers you would need in a busy election is a good number. So we're getting there. It's improved. We're getting closer to that goal. And next year, the presidential year always provides a very natural influx of new officers that are interested in working. So I think we're on a good pace there.
So the new people that we approved today, what's the process? What do they have to do in order to become active and be eligible to be assigned for November?
They are now active as of you guys approving them, and we will be working on getting them into the mix. So the election officer staffing team has already assigned chief, assistant chief, and a equipment and provisional specialist to each precinct. We do have one Republican and one Democrat in all of the precincts in the chief and the assistant chief positions. So they're just right now working on filling in the rest of the staff, and then they'll be sending out the assignments as we get a little bit closer towards the election. But I think I don't know, John, how far are we away at this point? A couple weeks maybe, or?
Yeah, we should have it ready by early September.
Okay, early September.
Okay, thank you.
All right, risk limiting audit.
So this was something that has been brought up at a couple of different board meetings, that there's a new way to do that there's a batch audit, which is essentially just auditing a particular precinct or, voting group for their machines. So, I wrote you all and said, I'm all for it, because, I feel like we've shown multiple times over the last year with hand counts and recounts that our equipment works, and that the process is accurate and fair, and you want to do it's a little bit of a burden on the staff we've had a special election and a recount this year, so it's been a busy year, and we're going into another busy year. So the only downside of this is it's extra work for the staff, but I think the benefits are strong there, and happy to show people that the process is accurate and works well.
So this has to be completed before certification, or
Yeah.
What are So walk through logistically what this would.
Yeah, so you guys have a sheet that's just from the state's instructions on this. They updated their instructions, I think this summer, on how this works. So you all have to pass basically a motion to go forward with, in this case, I would say a batch comparison risk
Okay.
limiting audit. We already did the other kind, I can't think of the name, ballot something, audit. Previously, that was, I think, a couple months after I started here, almost a year and a half ago. That one doesn't really do anything to show the machine. It sort of looks at the contest as a whole. The batch audit really focuses in more on a particular, precinct in the machines there. So we need to complete a form with elect. So I would say what we need for this is basically you all to pass a motion to, with the intent of doing that, and then I can prepare the paperwork that you all need to submit. I think we have to complete a form. London needs to sign off on the form, and then we submit it to the state, and then they will help us to sort of prepare for that that process.
So it's one individual precinct that we choose, or what's?
If they choose it.
It's, you all can decide the scope of it. I would suggest we limit it to, Loudon just completed one, they did one precinct. I would suggest we do a couple precincts. I don't think it's that much more burdensome to do 2 or 3 than it is to do 1. And I think it shows a lot more.
Okay.
I wouldn't do many beyond that, and I would keep it to election day precincts because I think it makes it more straightforward. We just had the recount, and the high-speed scanner had to scan 30,000 ballots, and it matched all of the machines to a ballot to the precinct. So I think it's a pretty good demonstration that the high-speed scanners work really well. So this would show the the election day. I guess technically it showed both scanners, but this would, I think the election day precincts would be a little bit more manageable given the tight time frame you've got around certification and getting all that done. So, and you all passing a motion would also let us look, I know sort of the framework of it, but I have to look a little bit more into this particular method and what we would need to do to prepare for it.
Well, based on that, I'll submit a motion that we indeed go forward with a risk limiting audit up to 3 precincts, and those based on only on election day precinct results.
Second motion.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, now we are at public comments. Do we have the clipboard of people that signed up? I know that probably most of you were here to talk about Sunday voting, and so we've agreed to do that again this year. So we're still happy to hear from you if you want to talk about that or something else.
Just a few pages.
Okay.
Two sheets of people all for today.
So
How
these
many
are
is
the
it?
people that have signed up, and we'll call individually. 3 minutes per person for comment. The first name is Aaron Mukherjee. Apologize if.
No, that's all right, thank you. Guess I'll sit. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Aaron Mukherjee. I'm the Voter Protection Director for the Democratic Party of Virginia. I'd just like to commend you all for preserving Sunday voting and ensuring that the citizens of Prince William County, regardless of race and socioeconomic class, are able to vote easily. As you know, Sunday voting allows historically disenfranchised voters to greater access to the ballot box, ensuring that the greatest number of Virginians have their voices heard. And we've seen electoral boards across the Commonwealth eliminate Sunday voting based on nothing more than a change in partisan composition. And so, as the body governing the timing of early voting, you're tasked with making voting easy and accessible, not easier for some and harder for others. And I think you did an incredible job today, and I commend you for defending democracy on a bipartisan basis and preserving every Prince William County's residents' access to the ballot. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Fuller.
Hello, board. Well, I just address a couple things. One, this is last election was my first time as a chief officer. One of the reasons I signed up to be a chief officer was Robin, who extolled the virtues of it when I first talked to him. I agree with Keith's comments on election officer training in terms of as much hands-on as possible. I'm disappointed that the county can't provide you adequate training resources. It's an embarrassment. And I applaud Mark's suggestion that you make a big deal about getting it. And I'm going to go to the meeting myself with the Board of Supervisors and explain the situation if they're not aware of it. The election officer survey was excellent. I gather you got some great information from it, but I thought it was well done, and I think it was useful for management of that process. The equipment check-in that you had at the last election was astonishing. I've never seen anything so efficient. It was like done by a Ford assembly line. I'm grateful that you're working on the 43 office people that were submitted to you. I'd be curious to get feedback on how that went, if they were all valid or not, and so forth. People did a lot of work on that. Regarding, Keith, your comment on election officers being trained by the Republican committee, unless Denny did that, I have no such thing. Now, some Republican somewhere might have done something, but it wasn't the committee, I assure you. And I believe that you're talking about that precinct that counted the ballots because they had a discrepancy. That was an experienced chief. He'd been on there a number of times. I talked to him. So I don't know. I think he got some bad info. I want to extol the virtues in the few seconds I have left of transparency. I'm grateful for the video recording, but I wish you would record the speakers. I watched a video last time of Natalia briefing you guys, and it was been nice to see her shining face on the video. Now, I'm probably one of the few people that looks at those videos when I can't get to this meeting. So I would like you to up the ante a little bit on your videos if you can. I'd like them to be published within 2 days. Why do we wait for a week for the video of the meeting to be published? It makes no sense. I believe that you should include in the published agenda for the meeting all the documents that you're going to report on. I mean, the ones that you're going to approve and so forth. Now, if Natalia's going to give you a briefing on something, it'd be nice to be able to see what it is, if possible. I know that's not always possible, but that would be a nice thing. I appreciate the fact that you are not too hardcore on allowing speakers to come in late with good ideas and so forth. I mean, I think that's a nice way to treat the public. I think I'm grateful, and I know a number of voters are grateful for what you're trying to do on roll maintenance. And I know that's been a deal, and I think we're making progress. I would say that having a bunch of people slopping around in the rolls is a problem, and it's good that you're working on it. I'm very grateful that you're going to do a batch comparison audit. I don't think we're going to be surprised by the results, but I think the public will be encouraged by the fact that the machines and the ballots matched exactly.
Can you wrap up?
Yeah, and so, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, maybe you could, you're here almost every meeting. You could do the color commentary. Because I know your YouTube videos get lots of viewers. So. All right, next, R.M. Jesse. Richard Jesse.
Yeah, good morning. This is my first attendance at a meeting, and so I just had a couple comments. First of all, compared to other places, the Board of Supervisors and the School Board, it seems the citizen time is done before the agenda. So I came here to speak about Sunday, but you already have. But if I objected to it or wanted it, it would have been nice to be able to have an input beforehand. The other comment I have is on this ballot. It would seem important that there's a random drawing of which precinct that you're going to do. And that drawing should not occur until afterwards. It should not be, we're going to do the Woodbridge precinct beforehand, because that leads to a possibility of somebody thinking there's something. So it should be something done as a random drawing and afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Harry Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name's Harry Wiggins. I'd asked the board to go back and look. There was an election task force in Prince William County after the 2012 election, where we had voters in Gainesville and the Potomac magisterial districts voting at 11 o'clock at night. A report, a bipartisan commission was established, and I worked closely with Bill Card. And we issued a report that was adopted by the County Board of Supervisors. I'd asked the members of this board to go back and take a look at that report, because it lays out a number of issues that the county, the electoral board is faced with on a continuous basis. So I just asked you to go back and take a look at that. Second thing, I want to commend the board for continuing to not suppress the vote, if you will, and having Saturday, Sunday, and good hours of voting. It's unlike what's happening in many other states where early voting is being restricted, and some states doing everything they can to suppress the vote. And it's really, I really thank this board for doing the exact opposite of encouraging the electorate to come out and vote by making more dates available. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace Littner.
Hello, board and officers in Eric Olson. My name is Grace Littner. I live in Coles District. I've been living in this county since about 1965. I grew up in this county. I still live in this county. Never saw any reason to move because I think it's a nice county. I've been voting since I was 18, since we've had levers and curtains and all that. In the approximately 2013, for almost 3 years, I was an election officer, and it was great. I got a real appreciation, more than just a voter, for Prince William County voting, because as an officer in the training that you were talking about, Mr. Scarborough, they told us, don't mention to the voters who to vote for, don't wear t-shirts. So there was even no need back then in the 2010s for partisan election officers, which I'm okay with, because that seems to be handled pretty well. Although I do remember, I thought I had heard or read that there was Republican election training for officers, but I could be wrong. But I'm glad that you spoke against that, Mr. Scarborough, and I'm glad we have Sunday voting. That's what I had planned to speak on. But thanks for passing that. And last but not least, I want to thank Mr. Olson for the job he's done and his staff, as he mentioned. So if he could pass that along. I've never had a problem as an election officer or voter, anything. I just love the election system here, and I just hope Mr. Olson will stay many more years in Prince William County. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Williams.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Jeff Williams, with the Prince William County Election Integrity Working Group. And I'd like to start off by commending the General Registrar. There was a election officer's newsletter that just came out yesterday, today, depending on your distribution. And right there on the banner at the top, you recognized an election officer who is now deceased, and his name was Rodney Reams. And Rodney not only was an election officer, but he was one of the founding members of the Election Integrity Working Group. And we greatly miss him. He was an affable, gentle soul who was willing to pitch in on any task that we put before him. He will be greatly missed. And I thank you for recognizing him. The other thing I was going to speak of was something that Eric has expounded on extensively, and that is the 43 packets of improperly registered voters that was submitted by members, 3 qualified voters in the county that are members of the Prince William County Election Integrity Group. And I'm happy to hear, Eric, that you're moving forward cautiously. I will point out that Code 24.2-429.3 does indicate that the general registrar also can submit names to be removed. It's not just 3 registered voters, but the general registrar can do that himself. Concerning those 43, I think it was pointed out that there was a lot of documentation and about them, and we had several people who probably spent 100 hours researching those 43 people and had extensive documentation from publicly available resources that we supplied to you to help validate that these people who, as you pointed out, Eric, were basically stale voters. They're sometimes 3 to 6 years that they have not lived in the county, and they're mainly out of state. A few were deceased. So we thank you for that review that you've already done, Mr. Olson, and that you'll be moving forward with that. And we commend your staff. They're doing a great job. These people were not something that was under your watch. It was long ago. We do request that we have an ongoing status of those 43 cases and the final disposition on a case-by-case basis of what happened to them. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Mike Kaczmarek.
Mike Kaczmarek, Gainesville. Thank you very much, Board, for hearing me out. Thank you also for approving the Sunday voting. I also agree that the public comment should be before your vote, so you really can have some input on your votes. I do have a concern about the parking situation here for early voting, because today it was almost impossible to find a place to park. I don't know how, if you're going to have some reserved spaces or something for for the voters when we actually do early voting. I definitely want to compliment your Google Docs on your early voting data. That's the best thing. It was very helpful in the information. And I also want to raise a concern concerning Haymarket Gainesville Library location for early voting. Fortunately, they did change the rules concerning signs on our tables and canopies. Before, the librarian refused to allow us to have any signs whatsoever. But right now, I don't know what the limits are. So I would hope that you would be able to talk or to the library what the rules are going to be when we actually start early voting again up there, so we can have clear guidance and rules. I know the old rule used to be no signs overnight, and then it went to no signs, period. Even a tablecloth that basically had our banner wasn't allowed on my table, or anything on our canopies, but now I think there's more leeway. But it'd be nice to really have an idea of what the rules are going to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Margie Oden.
Good afternoon.
You sit there and, yeah.
This is my first meeting attending. I really thank you for inviting me. I got a wealth of information. You seem to be doing a very thorough job, but as I am from the Neabsco district, my concern is keeping our doors open during the election. I think I heard something about changing the time to 9, which I don't think is very feasible for us, because we are in a real fight here in these elections going forward. So I am hoping that we will continue to follow our same schedule, open on Sundays, and from 8 until 5, I think it is, because we do have to keep our doors open. And another thing I wasn't clear on is purging voters. I really had a problem in wondering what would happen if a voter shows up and find out that they're purged. Will that voter be able to vote that day? Will that be cleared up that day? Or will they be given a provisional ballot? That was a question I have. And also, I think a microphone in this meeting, because we were outside there and a lot we didn't hear, would be helpful. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And you've been an election officer for quite a while too, right?
Yes, I do voter registration.
All right, good. Thank you. Next is Pat Widener.
Good morning. Thank you for all your hard work. Greatly appreciated. I'm from the Brentsville district, and I must say this is my first time, and I probably would not have come if I had known that public comment time was going to be at the end after you had voted. I'll leave that there. We know that democracy is centered on voting, and I would like to ask you that in your future elections, I know everything's done for this year, but maybe drop Monday and Tuesday and put in every Saturday and Sunday, because this is what I'm hearing from my friends in Brentsville, Gainesville, all over the county really. We've got a lot of working parents who commute, and families with kids, with a lot of stuff going on. And they really need be able to have more access Saturday, Sunday. If you have to drop Monday, Tuesday, I'm retired, so that's fine. But with me, I'll go anytime. But that is one concern. And also, I heard from several people about their college students. Their college students want to come home and vote on the weekends. And so, please consider more all Saturday, all Sunday voting, except for maybe that one right before the election day. I understand that would be perhaps a hardship there, as you said. Also, a lot of my friends are election officers, and I have declined to do that because of no split times, no split shifts. And I know that's been discussed before, but split shifts would really, I think, encourage more people to be election officers. And, I would do a split shift, but I could not hold out for the long hours, and I appreciate those people who can. So thank you for the work you do, and you're greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And next, Bonnie Klakowitz.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here to address you. And I will say that you have done a wonderful job today of explaining how things are going to work. I have been an election officer, excuse me, and I've lived in the county since 1985 and actually voted ever since maybe 1972. So I appreciate how you have done a job of integrity in helping us move forward, make sure our elections are safe. And as an election officer, I was very proud of the job that we did at our precinct. And I have seen that throughout the county. And I want to commend you on keeping those standards and also making sure that all the election officers are trained. I did come here to talk about Sunday voting. I live on the eastern side of the county in Woodbridge, and we have a lot of families there who work long hours. Both parents work, and the weekend voting is especially important to them. And the Sunday voting also is very important because some people have to work Saturday and Sunday. And being an election officer, I can remember standing there and saying, just park your car and run in here, it's almost 7 o'clock. So if those people could vote early and continue to vote early, and please take this same consideration into the 2024 election, because that one is going to be probably the biggest turnout every 4 years, and we need to have more days for voting. And I appreciate the absentee ballots, and we need to have drop boxes. And I think you've taken care of all of that, and I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to offer public comment that didn't sign up? Okay. Seeing no one, that will end public comment. So the next item of business is closed session. So thank you all very much for coming. Do we have a motion?
I move the electoral board go into closed session pursuant to Virginia State Code, section 2.23711, next exception A34, voting security matters, for the purpose of discussing issues related as mentioned.
Second motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Good job.
I propose a 5-minute comfort break.
I'm sorry?
Can we see the sign-up sheet for spelling?